In recent months, behind the scenes of the global technology market, a story has been unfolding that no one officially talks about. Yet it is being whispered about ever more loudly in the offices of analytical agencies, investment funds, and among major corporate insiders. It concerns a hidden conflict between China and Apple, a company that over the past 2 decades has become both a symbol of globalization and its hostage. After Donald Trump imposed new tariffs on China, along with his loud declarations about bringing production home to America, Beijing, according to sources cited by the Financial Times and Nikkei Asia, began to view Apple's relocation of assembly lines as a threat to national interests. According to 2 senior officials close to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, the Chinese authorities allegedly sent the company an informal warning. If Apple continues to transfer production facilities on a large scale to India, Vietnam, and Malaysia, China may impose additional tariffs on all new iPhone models supplied to the country and, in the future, restrict their certification and distribution. For Apple, according to Goldman Sachs analysts, this would be an economic death sentence, as China accounts for up to 18% of the company's global revenue and more than 90% of its production chains, including key components assembled by Foxconn and Luxshare. Insiders claim that the warning was delivered in the most polite form possible, but its message was clear. China will no longer tolerate the gradual exodus of Western giants from a territory it has long referred to as the heart of the world's factory. According to unconfirmed insider information, in early October, Tim Cook secretly arrived in Beijing, where he met with the Minister of Industry and the Deputy Prime Minister of China. The official version of the visit was strengthening strategic partnership and discussing investments in green technologies. But according to the Wall Street Journal, the real purpose was to resolve the growing conflict between Apple and Chinese regulators. Sources close to the negotiations say that the Chinese side issued an ultimatum. Apple must publicly confirm its intention to maintain a significant part of its production in China and not reduce purchases from local contractors. Otherwise, the government may reconsider tax benefits and tighten data security requirements. This came amid a new media campaign in China, where articles increasingly emphasize that true partners do not abandon China in difficult times. The Global Times, in an October publication, explicitly stated that Western companies playing on both fronts risk losing the Chinese market forever. The situation is further complicated by Trump's push to strengthen domestic production, insisting that all key supply chains be moved to the United States. According to Bloomberg, his White House team is developing an incentive program for corporations that withdraw from China, offering tax breaks and subsidies. Apple has found itself caught between 2 fires. China demands loyalty, and the United States demands patriotism. According to sources within the National Security Council, Washington is closely monitoring Tim Cook's negotiations and fears that the company may yield to Beijing in order to preserve profits. One analyst at the Brookings Institution stated that China is not merely a market for Apple, it is the core of its manufacturing ecosystem. Losing China would mean losing the ability to produce iPhones on the same scale as before. Meanwhile, according to the South China Morning Post, Chinese officials are already discussing scenarios for imposing new customs restrictions on foreign companies that weaken their presence in the country. Possible measures include an additional tax on high-tech electronics and new import software licenses. In practice, this could mean that every new iPhone model will go through a certification process, not in weeks, but in months, effectively paralyzing sales in China. In Chinese social networks controlled by state structures, subtle hints have already begun to appear. Bloggers with millions of followers connected to pro-government media are posting messages calling to support domestic smartphones and buy Huawei instead of American phones. All of this is perceived as a signal Beijing is ready to apply economic pressure if Apple does not show obedience. Insiders from Shanghai's financial circles claim that as early as September, within a narrow circle, the idea of creating a technical barrier for Apple was discussed, restricting access to components produced by Chinese subcontractors and tightening export conditions for rare earth materials used in iPhone cameras and stabilization systems. It should be recalled that China controls more than 80% of the world's rare earth metal production, and any change in export policy could instantly paralyze not only Apple, but the entire American technology sector. Economists from CNBC Asia have calculated that if China imposes even a 25% tariff on iPhone imports, it would reduce Apple's profits by at least $12 billion per year and cause its stock to fall by 15 to 20% within weeks. Tim Cook himself, according to The Economist, admitted at a closed meeting with investors in California that the current geopolitical situation is becoming the most dangerous for Apple since the sanctions against Huawei. At the same time, he emphasized that the company will act diplomatically and seek a balance between the interests of all parties. However, experts see this only as a polished formulation that hides fear, because if China truly moves from hints to action, for example, banning the use of iPhones in government institutions or restricting brand advertising on its platforms, the effect would be catastrophic. China has more than 900 million smartphone users, and nearly 20% of them are Apple customers. Losing this segment would trigger a chain reaction in the market, a decline in investor confidence, a fall in capitalization, reduced production, layoffs across supply chains, and panic among American shareholders. For now, both sides maintain an appearance of calm. China's Ministry of Commerce declares that it always welcomes international companies that comply with Chinese laws and respect the local market, while Apple's press office responds that the company remains committed to the Chinese people. But between the lines, another truth is evident. A cold technological war is underway, where survival depends not on innovation, but on diplomacy. If the United States intensifies tariffs and China retaliates by striking at Apple, the world could witness the greatest technological crisis of the decade, where what is at stake is not just profit, but the very existence of global production networks. And while Tim Cook smiles in photographs with Chinese officials, inside the corporation, panic preparations for the worst-case scenario are already underway. In Washington, all this is causing growing concern. The National Security Council has already presented Trump with a classified report stating that China is using Apple as a tool of political pressure on the United States. According to Politico sources, the president has been shown scenarios in which Beijing might indeed impose sanctions against Apple, and the consequences of such steps could be catastrophic not only for the company, but for the entire American stock market. Wall Street investment funds from BlackRock to Vanguard are already discussing the risk of a Chinese strike in their internal reports, while Morgan Stanley analysts warn that if China restricts iPhone imports, it will signal that Beijing is ready to use economic weapons against the United States at the highest level. Against this backdrop, China is demonstratively strengthening its ties with Huawei, granting the company tax benefits and support to expand its share of the domestic market. State media openly call Huawei a national pride capable of replacing Western brands. The irony is that it was Trump's own tariffs that triggered this process, and now Washington is witnessing how China is turning Apple's dependence on its factories into a powerful tool of geopolitical blackmail. All of this resembles a new form of Cold War, where instead of tanks and missiles, the weapons are supply chains, licenses, and rare earth metals. And if Apple becomes the first victim of this invisible war, other Silicon Valley giants may soon follow, for whom China is no longer just a market but a battlefield.